All right, welcome again. We'll be proceeding now making the coverage report for, or writing the function or the test for the department get by department number. And this one would have two tests. The first one is whenever we are able to find the department, and then the other one is whenever we don't find the department. We should be able to have the exception thrown. Now, to have that in place, we are going to quickly start with finding the department with that number. So what I'm going to do is going to be simple. So we're going to have two tests for get department by department number. So I'm going just to copy this one up here. And I'm going to remove the disabled annotation to ensure that this test is actually working. Now the next thing that we're going to do here is going to test this particular gets by department number, and then I'm going to have should have value. And then the other test that we're going to do is that should throw an exception. So we are going to should throw a runtime. So for now we're going to do a runtime exception. Okay. Now, these are two tests that we are going to have, and I need to have the argument for this one. All right. So we need to write this when found should have value when found. When found. All right. Which is supposed to be that, and then this one should throw a runtime exception when not found. Okay, so these are the two instances that we are going to have. So let's just start with the first scenario whereby we are going to have the particular method. So I'm going just to have declare. So I'm going just to do given. Right. So I'm going to have the ID. So I'm going to have integer ID department number to be equal to the department number that I want to search with is going to be 1. All right, and then I'm going to say when we need to mock the repository.find by ID. So I mean just to say whenever we call the department repository dot find by ID, right? And this one we are going to make use of the argument matcher from Mockito, which is going to be Mockito dot any int, right? So we're going to make use of any int. So this one can be actually, instead of importing by the class name, I can just make use of that, and then we can be able to quick fix and import, add a static import for an integer. So whenever we call the department repository.find by ID with any integer, then we are going to return a value. So then return, right? What are we going to return? We need to return an object of a department, right? So we need to return an object of a department. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to quickly create a department object. So that is going to be under given. So I need to have that department. So department, I can copy the code for creating one particular department here from up here, which is going to be this one. Right, so I'm going to return that particular department here. So I need to have this one, department equal to that. So I need to import this. So this should be department. Sorry, I need to copy and paste this one correctly. Yeah, so we are going to get a department object that way. So this is what we are going to ideally have, and then from there we need now to return a value. All right, so we need to return this particular value. So whenever we call the repository, we are going to return this particular object. All right, so to do that, you can see that this is complaining. All right, so whatever the find by ID do is returns an optional value. So we need to cast this one into an optional dot off. All right, we are going to supply the value of department. So that is given. All right. Now let's say what is when. Right. What are we going to do? We are going to do the department service implementation dot find get department by number, which is the department number that we just supplied. Right. Now, how then do we test? So this one is going to give us a value back, which is going to be a response. So I'm going to assign to a new local variable. So this is going to be department response. So you're going to get back a department response. Okay. Now, given these details, when we call the department service.get by department number, then what are we going to do? So the next thing is going to ask ourselves the question. So we need to ask the return type. What do we get back? So I'm going to quickly have here and assert that. I'm going to assert that the department response dot get department number should be equal to, right? This should be able to equal to our original ID, which is going to be the department number. So it should be able to be equal to our department number. The next thing that we're going to do is assert that the department response dot get department name should be equal to, all right, this should be equal to our department name. So our original department dot get name. So I'm going to ensure that we are able to equal to is equal to, then we're going to have this one, the department dot get department name. So those are the two things that we can be able to validate and ascertain that whatever the find by returns is actually working as expected in terms of get the department, and we're able to ascertain that this two, whatever is in the department response, is actually equal to our department number and at the same time our department name. Right. So let me run this particular tests and we confirm that our actual function is actually working okay. Right, as you can see, our tests actually is green, and now we can be able to run the unit coverage for this particular test. So let me remove some of these items here and use imports. Right, so we're going to run our test again with coverage, and we can be able to check on our department service implementation what is the coverage of our tests, so that we can be able to see what is covered and what is not covered. Right, so as you can see, this particular test has been marked as green. Then one thing you need to be aware of is that whenever we don't find, then we need to throw this particular exception, right? We need to throw this particular exception. And to do that, I'm going to quickly write the test for the other functionality. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy everything here and paste it within the not found. All right. Now, what we are going to do here is that we don't want to return anything. Whenever we are calling find by ID any integer, we're going to just return an optional empty of empty. That means we didn't find anything. Right? Now, whenever we call this one, we're going to have a value. But then this value, automatically when we call this function, it throws an exception. So what we're going to do, we are going to enclose it within an assert that throws. So what we're going to do, we are going to call this one, and within that assertion is what we're going to have the assertions in. So what we're going to do is we're going to have assert throws. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to assert throws, or we can say assert thrown by, which assert that thrown by, right? So we are going to make use of AssertJ, assert that thrown by, right? And we need now the supplier. As you can see here, we require a supplier. So this particular function is going to be our supplier of an exception, and this should be the lambda. Using lambda, we are going to make use of department find by department number, right? So we don't need this. Okay, so with this, we are going to have assert that thrown by, okay, the department service call to get by a department number, right? Then we are going to do what? We are going to ascertain certain things. So we are going to do some assertions here. So dot. So what we are going to do is going to be dot is instance. So we are going to check that the exception is actually an instance of what? What particular exception are we throwing? It's of an exception of runtime exception. So we need to validate that the exception that is thrown is actually a runtime exception dot class, right? Then we can be able to chain other message or assertions by making use of dot, and then we are going to say has message, all right? Okay, now what has the message? In this case, we are going to have has message. So we are going to confirm that the entire message is going to be the same as what we said here. So we are going to copy this particular message. And to do that, we are going to ensure that we are copying that, and our department number is the value that we are searching with. All right, and that will be able to mark our assertion for the exception, and now we don't require these other assertions. Okay, so that is whenever we don't find the entity with that particular ID, then whereby we be able to get an empty optional of empty, and in that case we are going to have an exception thrown by our department find by ID method. So let's run this particular function again and confirm that that particular test is actually running as expected. Right, as you can see, that particular test is green now, and you can see that there is particular test is actually working okay. Let me try to change the instance of this one. Let me just say it's going to be illegal argument exception, access exception class. Let me try to ascertain that the exception that is thrown is of a different type, yet we are throwing a runtime exception. So I'm going to run that, and you'll be able to see that it will be able to complain that this particular illegal access exception was never thrown, right? So you can see that the assertion error, expecting actual throwable of instance of illegal access exception, but then we got the runtime exception, and you can see that the runtime exception we got was department with our department with 1 does not exist. Okay, so that means that our test is actually okay whenever we are working with the actual exception that we are throwing. So that is how we test the find by ID or get by department number. And if we run now our function, you'll be able to see, or our class, you'll be able to see our coverage reports should be okay. Okay, so you can see that our department service now looks green from above, and that's how you gauge every condition has to be tested whenever you're dealing with a particular case function. Now let's see our update department. So we can do this one in our next session for the update department. So let me quickly do for the delete department, which is quite straightforward, and then we can be able to come and concentrate on the update department. So let's go to the delete function, right? What you're going to do is going to be simple. So you're going to have a simple delete test, and this particular test is going to be very straightforward. Okay. Now, for delete, we are going to have our department number, and what you're going to do is going to be simple. So you just have that, and then whenever we have that, and then once we have we're not going to mock the function for deleting the repository, but then we can just mock that it's going to return a void. As you can see, delete by returns a void, so we don't get any result back. So automatically we are going to validate that it's actually called. And then what we're going to do is going to say we are going to make use of our department service implementation dot delete department with the department number. And then what you're going to do here is actually you're going to first verify that the actual delete function from the department repository was actually called delete, right? Delete by ID and department number was called, right? So you're going to verify that this particular delete by ID was actually called. And then the next thing that you need to also ensure is that we can be able to have the map. So whenever we call this particular function, we are going to expect the map of. So what I'm going to do is going to be introduce a new local variable. We're going to have the map of the department. Now what you're going to do is we're going to assert that the delete response, delete department response, which is this one, dot contains and dot contains key or contains what I'm going to do is contains a key, and this particular key is going to be our success key. So we're going to have the success key. That is what we're going to check against, right? And then we can also have an assertion which contains a value. I think we should be able to have a value, and this particular value is going to be in this case we are going to confirm that our department is going to return the value of true, right? So we can be able to have that as true. Okay, so that is to ensure that we have the key and the value set for our method. Now I need to have this particular function, so I'm going to run this particular test and confirm that everything is actually okay before we proceed. As you can see now, our test case is actually working okay, and we are able to validate that whatever we're getting and our delete by department was actually called, and that's all that we require for this particular test. Now we come up to the last test of update department in our next session. Thank you for watching the video. Remember to subscribe, share, and like and comment whenever you have the issues, and also let me have your feedback on what you expect me to do next, so that I can be able to enhance our delivery. Thank you.